Alright guys, we've been making a lot of progress with our 2008 Chevy Trailblazer build, which we are aiming to be the ultimate sleeper street car build. I want this car to run 10.00 in the quarter mile and have all the creature comforts, like heat, AC, cruise control. Heck, the thing's even got a sunroof. To start off today's video, we are going to go underneath the hood and show you what we've gotten done there. Alright guys, we got a lot to update you on underneath of the hood, and let's start off with the thing right in the center. This is a powder-coated valve cover, and you'll notice that it is not even close to a stock configuration. I gotta say a huge thanks to Eric over at Atlas Industries for providing this valve cover to us. He let me choose the color and he did all of the modifications. If you guys are familiar with the original configuration, the oil cap is right here in the front, and he relocated it to back here just to clean up the look of the engine. He also added this fitting here to allow us to have our crankcase vent, and he shaved a few other little bits and bobs off of the valve cover just to really clean up the look. I am super thrilled with the overall look of the valve cover, and he actually will do this service for you, so I will put a link down in the description and you can get your valve cover done just like mine. In addition to the valve cover, Eric provided us with this fuel rail here. It is a fully aftermarket fuel rail that is made from stainless steel. I am a big fan of this setup. Not only does it allow for a larger inlet fitting, it allows you to center feed the fuel rail, which is what we will be doing on our setup. It's also made from a high quality material, stainless steel, so it will stand up to alcohol-based fuels, which we see in most modern fuels from the pump. Also, it has provisions on it down at the injector portion of the rail to accept the factory injector safety clip, which will allow the injector to stay attached to the fuel rail in the case that it were to rattle loose and come unseated from the cylinder head. This is actually how Colette Davis had an engine fire in her Corvette drift car build, and the car nearly burnt to the ground because she had an aftermarket fuel rail which didn't have the injector safety clip provision, and the fuel rail rattled loose from the engine and sprayed fuel all over her headers. I don't like engine fires, so I am a big fan of the setup there. Again, links will be in the description. Next, let's move on to the cooling. I've decided to upgrade to a aftermarket radiator. I went with a aluminum radiator that I found on Amazon. I think the thing was like 189 bucks. Frankly, I don't know how they make them that cheap, but I'm just hoping that the thing doesn't leak, but we will find out. And the keen-eyed among you will notice that I have laid the radiator back quite a bit in order to make room in the front for an intercooler. We will get to the intercooler a little bit later, but I also want to talk about what is behind the radiator, and that is a burn-down garage Chevy Silverado fan holder. Now, we have used these fan holders on other vehicles in the past, and they work out super well. If you're building a drag and drive car, or even just a regular street car, or even a race car, this is an excellent option. Now, it is a good idea to upgrade to an electric fan no matter what you're doing. But electric fans have come a long way over the years. What you are seeing more and more on modern vehicles is the move to brushless style fans. And the major advantages to a brushless style fan is that it will draw less current and allow you to have more accurate speed control. Additionally, it will allow you to usually spin the fan at a lot higher torque and higher speeds, and allow you to move a lot more air. Now, what the burn-down garage fan holder allows you to do is use a fan from a 2015 Chevy Silverado. And this fan happens to be a pretty bad-to-the-bone brushless fan offering right from GM. Now, there's a few aftermarket manufacturers out there who offer brushless fans for the hot rodders out there, but the problem is these fans are based off of a totally aftermarket design. You can't go to a parts store and get another one of these fans. So if you have one go bad on the side of the road, you're out of luck. Now, what the fan holder from Burn Down Garage allows us to do is go to any auto parts store or any junkyard in America and pick up a new fan if we run into issues. Also, it's an OEM quality part, so we know that it is well tested and, you know, designed to last for a long time. Additionally, if you want to carry a spare, like on a drag and drive, you only have to carry the motor portion of the fan. The other aftermarket options on the market require you to bring the entire assembly, which can be kind of bulky and difficult to pack into your trailer. If you guys are familiar with my Fairmont station wagon build, we recently upgraded the intercooler to a much larger unit. And that intercooler made cooling the radiator quite a bit more difficult because it parked a lot more restriction in front of it. The car went from having no issues staying cool to overheating wildly out of control. And so I needed to come up with a different solution. It just so happened that Dane Thompson offered to send us one of his new fan setups, and I installed it on the car, and my goodness, did it make a difference. Now the car stays nice and comfortably at 190 degrees on a blistering hot day. And I'll just tell you, it is worth every penny. Seeing that temperature gauge rise is a major source of anxiety, and it's nice to not even have to think about it. Now we have two more things to update you on in the engine bay. So let's start with the air conditioning. The air conditioning setup in the factory configuration is very much in the way of extracurricular activities. The one line runs over top of the engine, and the other line back here at the firewall gets really close to the exhaust and makes it difficult to install a downpipe if you're running a turbo. Therefore, I decided to adapt everything to O-ring style AN fittings that you would see like in a vintage air setup. It involves a lot of these little adapter flange pieces that then adapt to this AN style hose. Most of the fittings that you see are right from Vintage Air, and I definitely recommend that you get into their ecosystem because they got a lot of that garbage figured out, and they just make everything easy. Instead of routing the one line over top of the engine, we are now routing it around the front and down to the AC compressor. That brings me to the AC compressor itself. I was able to get this little block down here to install onto the AC compressor itself. That block is actually designed for, I believe, a Corvette, you know, some sort of LS AC compressor. And I also had to weld a fitting onto the block itself in order to house the little pressure sensor that is installed on there from the factory. It's a little hard to see, but I basically took the factory block that bolts to the compressor, and I milled that little piece off that has the pressure sensor housing, and then I welded that to my little block there. All of the lines from there are, again, more Vintage Air stuff, and I've basically converted everything to this Vintage Air style flange connections. Here at the firewall, this is actually the original line that comes off the expansion tank, and I was able to cut the line off and put a Vintage Air 90 degree, and this tucked this line much closer to the firewall and allowed it to get away from the downpipe. I also had to make sure that I had provisions here for the little pressure fitting here at the condenser that is in the original location, and the other pressure fitting is here on the dryer / expansion tank, whatever that thing is. Everything is in the original configuration, just some of the lines are a little longer, but it really cleans up the engine bay and makes it easier to install this monstrosity. But before we get to that, I also need to talk about the heat connections coming off of the engine. I was able to find metal fittings down here that would interface with the factory heater core, and then I welded stainless lines off of those fittings and then interfaced with rubber a little bit further away from the heat. I still have to install some little heat sleeves onto the lines here, but there should be more than enough room away from any heat sources there, and we should be good to go. So that should solve all of our problems. Now, the last thing we got to talk about in the engine bay is the elephant in the room. At the beginning of this build, I mentioned that I was going to install an R-Tech Performance turbo manifold on this build. But I changed my mind. If you are doing a build like this yourself, I highly recommend you go with the R-Tech Performance turbo manifold. It fits the chassis pretty well. That being said, my favorite part of just about any car build is building the header or the turbo manifold. I love coming up with creative ways to route the primaries and arranging them in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. I love showing off my skills with the TIG welder, and it's just something I have a lot of fun with. And I haven't gotten to build a turbo manifold in quite a while, and it's been bothering me. What really sealed the deal for building a turbo manifold for this particular chassis is I watched a video that Adam LZ did very recently. If you guys aren't familiar with his stuff, he built a Toyota Supra with a 4-rotor rotary engine installed under the hood, and he built the car for drifting. His goal with the car was to sort of emulate the legendary 787B sound. And frankly, that is a sound that I would love to have under the hood of my vehicle as well. Now, the problem is, he didn't get it right on his first try. They had to try a couple different configurations of exhaust in order to accomplish that sound. And it was not something that was just, you know, put it together and it just made the sound that he was looking for. So I need to get started on this. I need to start building exhaust manifolds for these engines so that I can start refining them and taking notes as to what I did and changes that I can make in order to maybe someday build the ultimate turbo manifold that makes the exact sound that I am looking for. And this was a convenient opportunity to take my first dart throw at the wall and see how this configuration sounded. And what he found is when they went to a rotationally timed configuration, meaning that each exhaust pulse went in a circle in the collector and sort of made a swirl in the exhaust pulses going into the collector, he found that this was the key to getting the sound that he wanted. So that's what we did on this one. I attempted to make the runner lengths as close to one another as possible. I couldn't do that perfectly because of some of the constraints of the chassis, but I did my best. Now, one of the reasons that this header looks so wild is because I had to mix match a few of the primaries in order to get them to go into the collector in a rotational sequence. To elaborate on what I mean by rotationally timed, what I mean is that the pulses going into the collector follow a rotation. The firing order on most inline sixes is 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4. So what we did is we arranged the tubes going into the collector in that same order. So we put number 1 here, 5 there, 3 there, 6 there, 2 there, and 4 there. And what you can see is that it results in sort of a rotational configuration. So I'm super excited to hear what this exhaust manifold sounds like, and I hope you are too. Alright guys, it is time to show you what I did on the sending unit for the Trailblazer. There are a lot of options out there that make these drop-in fuel pump assemblies to put like twin Walbro pumps or a single Walbro pump. And the problem with those setups is a lot of times they don't include the evaporative emissions provisions, and they're also really expensive. Most of the time they are right around $1,000 for the whole setup, and given that a set of Walbro 450s is like right around, I don't know, $200-300, and all that's really required to make this fuel pump assembly is like an aluminum plate and a couple fittings and some rods. It's really not that complicated of a piece, and I didn't feel like paying $1,000 for something that's simple. Also, Matt from Sloppy Mechanics gave me this Fuel Labs fuel pump. I'm not exactly sure which one it is, but he said that it topped out around 700 wheel horsepower on E85, and that's right around what I'm shooting for. What's cool about this pump is that it is a variable speed pump. So there's 3 terminals here on the bottom. There's your power, ground, and then there's a pulse width modulated pin so that you can change the speed on the pump. So we should be able to vary the speed and not overheat our fuel. It also happens that this fuel pump is just about the perfect height for this tank. So I was able to literally screw it right to the bulkhead fitting that I have installed on the factory fuel hat. And it is like the perfect height for the Trailblazer fuel tank. Now the other part of having a fuel tank, especially one that is this long, is you need to really think about how the fuel is going to react when you're coming to a stop or accelerating. This thing is very long, and it's very likely that there's going to be fuel slosh back and forth in this thing. So it helps to have a little surge canister inside of the fuel tank. The factory fuel sending unit has that. You can see this little piece right here. That is the idea of that little guy right there. And in order to accomplish that on our setup, I bought this. This is just a little steam tray, something you might see at like a Chinese restaurant. It's meant to have food in it. The reason that I chose it is because it was roughly the right shape and size. It fits down through the hull, and it's made of stainless steel, so we know it will stand up to E85 or whatever alcohol type fuel I might use. And as you can see here, the Fuel Lab pump fits down inside of it. Trust me, it does. I'm not gonna fight with it right now. Now, with this little surge tank thing, I'm literally just going to drop it down here inside of the fuel tank, and it is going to be held in place by the fuel pump itself. I'm not going to affix this to anything. It's literally just going to have the fuel pump sit down inside of there and keep it from rolling around. So with this fuel pump setup, I will have my factory fuel level sensor. I'll have the evaporative emissions pressure sensor. I have my wires coming out of the top for the Fuel Lab pump. And then I will plug in the original plug here that will have my fuel level sensor and the grounds to keep this part of the fuel tank grounded so that there's no static electricity. And then what we will do is this new bulkhead fitting here, this 10AN, that will become my feed line. I will run PTFE up to the engine. And then this is the original feed line from the stock Trailblazer setup. This will now become my return, and that return fitting will go down into my little surge tank and keep that full for when it is returning fuel, and we should be good to go. All right, the next thing that we need to handle on the Trailblazer is the transmission cooler. Now, I could probably squeeze the transcooler into the front of the vehicle, but space is getting to be kind of limited up in the front, and I don't really like the idea of using the original style transcooler that the Trailblazer used, which they basically run the transmission fluid through a heat exchanger and exchange it with the engine coolant. I would much rather have better control of the transmission temperature with its own dedicated cooler. And we actually had somebody reach out to us with what you see right here. I want to say a big thanks to the folks over at CanMade. They came out with this kit for doing a remote mount transmission cooler. This should be able to more than handle all of your transmission cooling needs, and we are going to throw it into the back of the vehicle. We will not be running a spare tire on this car, so we are going to put it in the cavity that is now left where the spare tire used to live. I will have links down to the folks over at CanMade in the description. If you guys are in need of a transmission cooler like what you see here, give them a look. Now, in order to solve our cooler fittings on the side of the transmission, I got these guys. These go from the 8 HP transmission cooler fittings to a 8AN. It seems like 8AN is the go-to for the 8 HP guys. I'm used to like Turbo 400s. They usually use dash 6, but that's not a huge deal. We just got to run a slightly larger line. Now, I will say that these fittings will only work on the car 8 HPs. The truck 8 HPs have a slightly different configuration. It actually has like a plate that bolts onto the side with O-rings, but the car ones actually have these screw-in style fittings, so just be wary of that. All right, next we got to talk about the drive shaft. Ottawa Driveshaft and Steering once again helped us out with this drive shaft that you see here. It features a collapsible section, which is a little bit different than what we typically do. Most of the transmissions that we normally run have a slip yoke in the back, so as the suspension travels and goes up and down, your drive shaft needs the ability to move back and forth. And normally, we run transmissions that have a slip yoke that can slide in and out. This transmission does not have that. In fact, the factory application would have had a CV style connection here at the front, and that CV has the ability to plunge in and out. We decided to convert to a traditional U-joint like what you see here, and that has no ability to plunge in and out. This piece here is a piece that I bought with the transmission actually. The previous owner had this in a custom application, and it basically takes that CV flange and converts it to a 1350 yoke. And then we have this collapsible section. I believe this is another Sonax piece that basically has a splined input and output and has the ability to basically collapse the drive shaft some. In the back, it's just another 1350 yoke, and it goes to the companion flange for the Ford 8.8 rear, and from there it's good to go. Another thing to talk about underneath of the car is the exhaust. We decided to go with a 3.5-inch stainless system. I tried to reuse as many of the original exhaust mounts as possible. Now, traditionally, there is a muffler in this area, but we decided to move it to the rear of the car. This is actually a muffler that I bought from my Studebaker originally, but it turned out that it was a little too deep for what I needed there. I wanted to go from 3.5 to dual 2.5. But it didn't really work out in that car, and so we decided to use it on this one and have twin exhaust tips here in the back. This muffler is definitely advertised to be on the quieter side, and that is definitely one of our goals with this project. All right, guys, this is the intercooler that we are going to attempt to use on the Trailblazer. This intercooler is from some sort of tractor trailer or big truck. A friend of ours gave it to us, and the reason that I want to go with this intercooler is because it has fairly large cross-sectional area going through the core, and it is very thin. We don't have a ton of room in the front of the Trailblazer to go with something thicker, so the best way to get a little more flow area is to just make the thing really tall. So with this intercooler, we should be able to get the intercooler to be as tall as physically possible, and it shouldn't be so thick that we don't have room for a fan or a radiator. Now, we will have to modify this thing slightly. It is a little bit too tall, and these little bells at the top need to be cut off and relocated. And we'll have to notch the cores down here at the bottom a little bit to get around the frame rail. So without further ado, let's get this thing chopped up and into the front of the Trailblazer. So basically what we ended up with on the intercooler is I cut the top couple rows of the intercooler off, and then I welded some tubes onto the ends of the end tanks and then sort of capped off the top here. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but frankly, I've just wanted to get this project done, and I've not really done a great job of filming a lot of things, so sorry about that, guys. But I wanted to kind of take this moment to have a little bit of a heart-to-heart with you guys. I've been having a little bit of a rough time lately. I've been struggling recently. Winter is always really tough for me. I think I definitely suffer from seasonal affect disorder or something of that sort. Every year it seems to get worse. My dad recently had to have surgery on his other shoulder. This is more fallout from the wreck that he had just about 2 years ago with the Volvo that we built. And so it's been a little bit hard to try and get work done in the shop and also film and edit videos for you guys, just because it's just me and I don't have my dad to rely on. I know he doesn't appear in a ton of videos, but he is always helping me out with stuff in the background, and I really struggle to do it without him. So it's just been a little bit tough to provide content for you guys, and I've been a little bit down in the dumps here or there. So do me a favor, if you've been enjoying the content recently on the channel and you would like to help us make this thing grow and maybe take it to the next level, it would really help me if you shared the videos or shared the channel. And if you're not subscribed, maybe consider subscribing. I know there's a lot of people out there that are also probably struggling a little bit, and I just want to say you're not alone. Life's tough, and every once in a while we need a shoulder to lean on. So if you're struggling out there, I want to say you're not alone, and just keep your chin up. Keep pushing. Don't give up. I know that's easy for people to just say and a lot harder to do, but hopefully having somebody to relate with brings you a little bit of solace. I know it definitely does for me, but you just got to keep going.